Hey, it's RJ Ronquillo here, and in this old musty guitar case is something that for the longest time I never wanted. But obviously I had a change of heart, and today we're going to be talking about that as well as check out my new to me guitar. So this is a vintage 1961 Fender Jazzmaster. All original for the most part. There is a little bit of question whether or not this is a refret. I had one friend say it was, one friend that said no, so I might need a third opinion on that. But it does have the original factory blonde finish, which I did have 3 friends verify. Now, I'm in no way a collector or a Fender historian, so naturally I had a lot of questions and I sent a lot of texts to my friends, and I'm thankful that they know more about this stuff than I do. But it has all the stuff that you would expect from a Fender Jazzmaster of this period. It's got the Brazilian rosewood slab fingerboard, which was what I was looking for. It's got the spaghetti logo with the interestingly misspelled synchronized, where it says synchronized floating tremolo. It has no H, which they later changed in the mid-60s, I think. But it's in really great condition. The original pickguard, usually on these, has a tendency to shrink and warp a little bit, but this seems pretty flat. It does have a little bit of shrinkage. I can see a little gap here as well as here, but all in all, it looks great. And the pickups and the electronics are, as far as I know, all original, and they sound killer. Now the neck is really interesting too. There is some interesting bird's eye figuring happening on the back of the neck as well as the headstock, and you can kind of see it on the front of the headstock as well. But what really grabbed my attention on this one is this has a narrow nut, which I guess is kind of rare. It's very possible that this was a custom order, but typical Fenders from this period have a 1.65 inch nut width. This one has a 1.55 inch nut width, which is quite a big difference when you get your hands around it. It's funny, it feels like I have giant hands. But to me, it's still comfortable, it just feels a little bit different. And when guitars feel different, they end up being somewhat inspiring to play. You know, sometimes you have to adjust your playing or your technique a little bit. So it's almost like a challenge of sorts. I think Uncle Larry Tom Bukovac said something to the effect of, a good guitar plays you, you don't play it, or something like that. But yeah, the narrow neck doesn't bother me, and actually it gets really, really comfortable once you start getting up higher on the frets. But the neck contour itself still has, you know, a decent amount of meat behind it. So combined with the narrow fingerboard, it's really cool feeling. And I knew all of this when I bought the guitar, and I have to give a huge shout out to Metronome Music in Mansfield, Ohio, and their all-time favorite customer, Robert Baker, for connecting us. Now, I've always said that I would never buy a guitar, especially a vintage guitar, sight unseen without playing it. But I looked at all of the inventory of all my favorite stores here in Nashville. I even went to the Amigo Guitar Show here last weekend, hunting for the right vintage Jazzmaster and comparing prices. And I checked Reverb, I checked a bunch of online vintage guitar stores. But long story short, Metronome had this beauty and we got connected. And by the way, they were totally awesome. I kind of bothered them asking for a bunch of pictures of, you know, underneath the pick guard, and to take the neck off so I could see the, you know, what the paint looked like and if there was any factory markings I should know about. But they also overnighted this guitar to me. So I actually had this in my possession less than 24 hours after the transaction. It was awesome. And they also told me a little bit about the interesting history of this guitar. So my understanding is that there was only one owner of this guitar that lived in the Cleveland area. He bought the guitar new in 1961, played it around town, and then I guess it sat in the closet for a period of time, like 15, 20 years. So as far as I know, it hasn't left the Cleveland, Ohio area since the 60s. And what's really cool is some of the extras that they included in the case. So all original case. It smells definitely original. It's very musty. So the case is falling apart a little bit, and I do have a hardshell SKB case that's on the way just so I can safely store this for long periods of time. But I'm definitely keeping the case. It's a great piece of history. Got the trem arm. So here's what came with the guitar case. This strap, which is obviously a vintage, 60s type of strap. So this design on the strap is kind of iconic and really particular to the period, but Jimi Hendrix had a strap just like this. And actually I bought a reproduction that's very similar from a company called Apivo. They're in Europe, but they have this strap, which is pretty similar, same vibe of the design, same kind of color scheme as well, but I thought this was really cool. And what's interesting with this strap is, and they told me this story, Metronome told me this story. So there's a little bit of a mark here, which is from the strap. I guess the owner had the strap on the guitar or below the guitar for the longest time. And I guess the print made its own print on the finish of the guitar because it was underneath the guitar in the case for so long that, some of the dye, I guess, from the fabric got onto the finish, and that's kind of an interesting story. So I'm definitely keeping this strap. And while we're here, you can definitely see the see-through blonde finish. You can see the grain beautifully on the backside. Really nice checking. I love the checking. There's something about vintage guitars and nitrocellulose. It has a smell, We got this cable that looks pretty old, but I don't think it's from the 60s. This is a Whirlwind Music, so like a Whirlwind cable, but I think this is from the 70s. If anyone remembers these coily cables, I believe it's like a Whirlwind rattlesnake cable or something. I might actually do a test on this later, but a lot of people will complain that a Jazzmaster pickup is a little bit bright, and it's usually because they use a 1 meg pot. I'm wondering if this old coily cable would attenuate some of those frequencies. So I might actually do like a A/B test with this guitar, this cable, and then like a modern expensive cable. Some other interesting things. There's some old GHS bronze guitar strings. So these are like acoustic guitar strings. But I do remember this packaging. I grew up in Michigan. Here's something in the box. This is a Hamilton guitar capo. I don't know if they still make these anymore, but it's got the directions. I always like old printed stuff, especially from the 50s and the 60s, just because maybe I'm kind of like a typography nerd. Package design, that's pretty cool. But this is an old capo. What is this? Kaiser Capo Company, major and minor chords conversion with the capo. And then some of these old picks. Especially this one. This is cool. One of these big triangle Fender heavy picks. So a lot of this stuff is probably from the 70s. Some old, nylon Hercos. But, I thought this stuff was pretty cool to include. Okay, so why a Jazzmaster? Why would I want to get a Jazzmaster? Like I said before, I never liked Jazzmasters. For the longest time, I felt they were kind of awkward to play. I wasn't a big fan of the vibrato system, the shallow break angle of the bridge. The pickups weren't generally my taste. I'm someone that's always been favoring Stratocasters and like Gibson Les Pauls and just the basic, rock and roll guitars. But I've played a lot of offset guitars, vintage Jazzmasters, Jaguars. But there was one Jazzmaster that I demoed at Carter Vintage Guitars a couple years ago. It was like the best Jazzmaster that I had ever played. I believe it was a 1962 Olympic white, and it had gold hardware. And I remember doing the demo and just being instantly inspired. I really liked the sound of the pickups. The neck was super comfortable. It was light. And then maybe a couple months ago, I was watching that video again because I wanted to relive that sound. And I was reading the comments, and a lot of the comments were really encouraging and inspiring. A lot of you said that should be RJ's signature guitar, and another one said that they could listen to a whole album of that type of music and what I was playing. So clearly, that particular Jazzmaster was inspiring. I knew it at the time when I demoed it, and I totally would have bought the guitar, but it was totally out of my price range. I think it was like 24, 25K. So that was a guitar that got away. So that sparked my interest in getting a vintage Jazzmaster, and I had considered buying a new or a custom shop Fender, but I felt that there was a certain kind of magic mojo, maybe because it was a 62 and it had the slab rosewood board. That's what kind of got in my head as far as like, okay, I need to find one that has the slab rosewood fingerboard. But yeah, that's kind of the story of why I wanted to get a Jazzmaster. And I guess another thing is, you know, I don't have a lot of vintage guitars. I mean, I have vintage Gibson jazz guitars, hollow bodies, but I've actually never owned a vintage solid body guitar. I figured it was time to get a solid body, and if I was gonna do it, I'm gonna go big. I'm gonna get something great. So when I got the guitar, it did come with like 10s. It might have actually had 9s. It was really slinky playing. It played really, really well, considering that, you know, Leo Fender designed this bridge to have 12 gauge strings. Metronome did a great job setting it up. I actually put flat wounds on it. And actually the wound strings come from a set of D'Addario 11 chromes, which are the flat wounds. And then I just took the unwound strings, the plain strings, from another set of 11 pure nickel D'Addario. So it's kind of a mix of a set, and it's perfect, you know? Other than that, I'm gonna keep it pretty much original. I might play around with the bridge a little bit. I did order a mastery, and I do have a really cool bridge from Bell Rock that I wanna try out on this. So maybe I'll make a video comparing the original Jazzmaster bridge to those two other modern bridges. But that's it. I mean, this is a perfect guitar. Big thanks again to Metronome Music and Robert Baker. And if you'd like to see this guitar in future videos, guitar demos, and guitar lessons, click that subscribe button. I'm Ronquillo, and I'll see you in the next video.